Good morning and welcome to today's Small Bootcamp session. My name is Faith Ritchie and I am the Small Business Programs Manager here at the Arizona Commerce Authority. As a response to the COVID crisis, the Arizona Commerce Authority created Small Business Bootcamp and Resource Collective. This program was created to provide support, information, and education to small business owners of various industries to return stronger than ever. And today, we are celebrating a milestone. Today is our 100th bootcamp session. For the past 32 weeks, the ACA has worked with 96 different community partners to provide 100 unique and informative sessions to over 7,000 participants. That being said, we must take the time to thank all of our amazing community partners who have volunteered their time and expertise to Arizona's small business economy to do what we've set out to do, return stronger. If this is your first time joining us for Small Business Bootcamp, don't worry, we have recorded all of our previous sessions and have shared them onto our website, azcommerce.com/small business bootcamp. In coordination with the recorded bootcamp sessions, we also have additional statewide resources for business to return stronger after the COVID crisis. This resource collective is multiple industry information and help to return stronger. ACA financial updates are also located on our website. However, if you would like more information of these programs that are currently on your screen, please let us know in the chat box and we will be sure to send you those links directly. Now is also a great time to be aware of the ACA's different programs. Whether you are beginning a business or pivoting your business, there are definitely different resources available for you to thrive. Everything from small business services to Arizona at Work to the Arizona Manufacturing Extension Partnership are available to Arizona businesses. The Small Business Checklist is an interactive and intuitive online resource that guides entrepreneurs to business resources and commonly requested licensing information for local, state, and federal levels. Again, whether you are starting, operating, or growing your business, this information is available to you on the ACA website. Last but not least, if you are still looking for additional COVID-19 information and resources, we do recommend that you check out the website arizonatogether.org. Now, while we are celebrating our 100th session, we cannot forget to promote our upcoming 101st and 102nd sessions that will resume after the Thanksgiving holiday. On Tuesday at 9 o'clock, we will be discussing COVID-19 tax relief for individuals and small businesses. So again, we hope that you register for next week's sessions. Now, for our 100th session, we wanted to identify a small business that not only has thrived through this pandemic, but one that could beautifully showcase the strength of community and collaboration. While we are excited to welcome Jeff Herbert from Superstition Meadery, I would first like to introduce Keith Watkins, Senior Vice President of Legislative Affairs and Rural Development at the Arizona Commerce Authority, Shivani Dubey, Deputy District Director of the Small Business Administration's Arizona District Office, and Jerry Denniston, SBDC Director at the Yavapai College Prescott Valley Campus, to talk about their work and how they have contributed to this business's story. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Keith, Shivani, and Jerry. Thank you all so much for being with us today. And we are excited to learn all of the amazing work that you all do.
Great. Well, thank you, Faith. It's really wonderful to be here on this 100th edition of the Small Business Boot Camp. And it's fortuitous that we've got Jeff Herbert from Superstition Meadery on today. As we were talking about this internally, I recalled back on December 14th of 2015, getting a call from Jennifer Herbert in the morning, and a call from a very distraught Jennifer Herbert, I might add, who was having difficulty getting a loan through their bank. And she was calling ACA as a bit of a last resort, didn't know where to turn, and was asking for any kind of guidance. And so it just so happened that at that time we had a credit enhancement tool called the Arizona Accelerator Infrastructure Fund, whereby we took a subordinate position to a banker's position and essentially backed the loan for a certain amount. And so I put Jennifer in touch with our program manager at the time, who was able to work with Jennifer and Jeff. And by March of 2016, they got their construction and equipment bridge loan to open their meadery there in Prescott on Whiskey Row. So I thought, gosh, it's interesting and really a great success story that we've got Jeff here today to talk about where Superstition Meadery has gone and where they're going, and the small part that we played in helping to get them there. So with that, I'll turn it over to Shivani.
Thank you, Keith, and thank you, Faith. It's nice to be here today. Thank you to Robert as well from the Arizona Commerce Authority. We've had a great partnership with the Arizona Commerce Authority, and we appreciate being on today. What a great session, 100 sessions to help during this recovery and pandemic. It's impressive and it's appreciated, and I think the word collective really does highlight what we all do. We've been partners with the SBDC and Jerry for a long time, and you shared your Jeff and Jennifer story, so I'm going to do the same here. we met Jeff and Jennifer through Jerry through the SBDC, and we're fortunate to invite them to a roundtable with our administrator at that time, who was Linda McMahon. And shortly after that, and I'm not going to steal Jerry's thunder, so I'm not going to say the whole story, but ultimately they've had great success, and we've been fortunate to have them in our partnership and in our collective. Just last month, our new administrator, Jovita Carranza, had visited the Arizona network and all the different locations here, and visited our current small business of the year for Arizona in Tucson, as well as a few other businesses, and Jeff and Jennifer's was one of them. So I want to offer a message of optimism for this year, and happy early Thanksgiving to folks, and keep being resilient small business owners. The year has turned out to be not what anyone has expected. Our Arizona Paycheck Protection Program loan numbers, we've got about 85,000 loans that we've given out through our lenders for the PPP loan, and that's about $8.6 billion to date. So that's a pretty good, recovery number as far as what's going on for our market. Our EIDL loans, we've got about 60,000 economic injury disaster loans in Arizona as of a couple of weeks ago, and that's around $3.1 billion in lending to, from our SBA disaster loan money. So we've got recovery going on out there. We've got over 500,000 small businesses that, we've been touching, as well as the Commerce Authority and the SBDC. There's a market out there, and we cannot do this without our small businesses, and the recovery is happening and it's real. I think Jeff's story is going to highlight that. We have resources and assistance available to small business owners for all sorts of things. And I saw Jim Pipper from our office is on the calendar for next week. So I know we're all working together and collectively to make the recovery happen. And we are greatly appreciative of all our small business owners. So we are thankful for you on this Thanksgiving, and we appreciate all the hard work and resilience that it takes to get through this pandemic. And we hope that everyone is safe and your families are safe. And I want to thank the SBDC and Jerry and her team, as well as all of the network. We have resource partner relationships that go way back. And, the SBA is a federal agency, and we've been around since 1953. But our local contacts and our local market is really what makes everything work to be successful for small business. So thank you. And Jerry, I'm going to turn it over to you. Oh, Jerry, I think you might be on mute.
Thank you. I'm on mute, of course. So yeah, this is thank you, Shivani, for that, and also Keith and Robert Theobald. This has been a wonderful partnership that we have with the ACA and with the SBA. It's just been a great collaborative experience. I joined the SBDC in June of 2017, and that shortly after that is when, in doing some outreach to Jeff and Jennifer Herbert, is when we reached out to just introduce ourselves and get to know them. And I know that they were a current client of the SBDC, working with my predecessors. And Jeff and Jen, I just want to say I've been so thoroughly impressed with how you have grown your business. You've met your challenges. You know, we've been providing whatever coaching assistance we could provide as your needs arose, including offering some space so you could have team meetings in our building pre-COVID, and other kinds of coaching assistance, and just to see your growth trajectory and how you have taken your business and worked as a team. I mean, what's been impressive to me is it's unusual for a husband and wife to grow a business together like this and be as successful as these two have been. And I say repeatedly, it is because you have clearly defined roles in your business. You have identified what your strengths are and what Jen's strengths are. You work to those strengths, and you've divvied up the roles and the responsibilities across the team. And that is going to, you know, now you're at a growth level where you've got to elevate yourselves even more. And this is just an exciting phase that you're going into. So I'm just been thrilled to work with you, and then to nominate you for both the state Small Business Success Award in 2019 and the National SBA Success Award, and then to have you win both of them was just a phenomenal experience for you as well as for us. So just delighted, and I think you represent small businesses in Arizona. And because you've done it, you've bootstrapped it, and you've shown it is possible when you reach out for help and you do all the right things and you meet the challenges head on and you pivot and you adjust. So congrats. And now I guess it's time for Jeff and Jen.
Well, thank you, Jerry. It's so great to be here, everyone. I'm going to start by sharing my screen. But first of all, do I sound okay? And can you guys copy my video? Just fine.
Yes, perfect.
All right. Thanks, guys. All right. So good morning, everyone. It really is an honor to be here today speaking to you, and thank you to the ACA for inviting Jen and I to prepare this presentation, and for me today to speak to you about who Superstition is and some of the crazy challenges that we've all been through in 2020 and how we were able to adapt some of the decisions we made. We're going to start off by going through a little Mead 101. And we're going to tell our story and talk about what happened this year and where we're going next. So I'd like to introduce just sort of my background. I have an undergraduate degree in anthropology from ASU and a master's degree in emergency management from ASU. And I spent 20 years in the fire service. And like many firefighters, I started a side job, and mine happened to be a meadery. And it all began with my wife, Jen, giving me the gift of a homebrew kit in 2009. And Jen's background is very impressive. She had won national awards during her career in environmental health and safety, and also has a master's degree from ASU in environmental technology. And together we decided to start a company. So without further ado, let's talk about what mead is. Many of you probably have never heard of mead. And even when you hear the word, that sort of our joke is it's not salami or marijuana. People always think meat or weed, and then they see our logo, and it's always kind of a fun conversation. And we've taken our biggest challenge as a company, and that is that no one knows what we make. And what we make is expensive to make because the primary fermentable ingredient in mead is honey. We're going to talk a lot about honey this morning. And we've turned that into our greatest asset, and that is that we have been able to define an industry. You guys are actually the first group to go through our new Mead 101 presentation. And we've developed this recently because we're about to begin distributing with Hensley, Arizona's largest beer distributor. And because of COVID, we had to come up with a new way to train everyone, all of these new sales reps across the state. And so we're going to go through these identical slides with all of the Hensley reps in the next week or two. So what is mead? At its simplest, mead is wine made from honey. It is totally intertwined with history, religion, and mythology, some of my passions and interest academically. And mead can be made from any legal fruit, herb, or spice, and can age in any barrel that you can imagine. But first, it begins in nature. So we're going to talk about the birds and the bees for a minute. So everyone knows that bees make honey and they travel to flowers. But here's some pretty cool facts. A honeybee will visit 50 to 100 flowers during one collection flight. And in order to make 1 pound of honey, bees from that hive will have to visit 2 million flowers and fly 55,000 miles. So when the bees, as in this picture from my front yard, this lady is drinking nectar from a flower, they will store that nectar in a honey sac, which is an appendage connected to their esophagus, separate from their stomach. But they will return to the hive and they will actually regurgitate honey from the honey sac into the honeycomb. And bees know that they have to actually dry out the moisture content of that nectar to be below about 18% in order for that honey to become stabilized. And when we talk about stability in the fermentation world, we mean if something is stable, it will not ferment. And without getting into hyperosmotic pressures, the bees know that no amount of wild yeast and bacteria present in the air, which is all around us and invisible, unless you have a microscope, could actually start to ferment that honey. If they didn't dry out the honey to be below 18%, they would be making mead themselves. And they may have a good time, but that wouldn't get them through the winter the same way it does us. So honey has been called nature's perfect sugar. And it even has trace amounts of hydrogen peroxide and has been used for thousands of years as a topical medicine. So a long time ago, people thought, and actually until not too recently, people thought that bees got their honey from heaven and that it was a gift from the gods and that fermentation was magic. It's believed that mead and making mead, even if by accident, by hunter-gatherers, predates all written history. So it doesn't matter where you're from or where your ancestors are from, they were drinking mead. And we talk about mead being the world's oldest fermented beverage. And if you were to Google that, you're going to come across stories from the beer world and the wine world saying, well, in ancient Sumeria, they were drinking beer 5,000 to 6,000 years ago, and they were growing wine grapes in the Caucasus Mountains. And all of that is true. But what we know from science, the oldest tested fermented alcohol beverage on Earth ever discovered was from China 9,000 years ago. And it was made of honey and rice and a fruit, which was either hawthorn berries or grapes. And so Patrick McGovern, who's a biomolecular archaeologist from the University of Pennsylvania, did that research. And he's even worked with Sam Calagione from Dogfish Head, one of my favorite breweries in Delaware, to recreate some of these recipes. So honey was unequivocally, undeniably part of the oldest known beverage in history. But India gosh, the Rig Veda, the ninth mandala is one of the chapters in this classic text from India, and it mentions a drink called soma, which we believe is mead, in every other line in this epic poem. And then Ethiopia and Poland are two places today where mead is still a national beverage. And there's not a single commercial meadery in Ethiopia. But if you were in Addis Ababa today drinking at a bar, there's going to be some homebrew mead made in the back room that you're going to be able to order. And even going to Ethiopian restaurants in Washington, D.C., when we were receiving our SBA award there last summer, they have homebrewed mead illegally behind the counter on the menu. And if you know how to ask for it, they'll kind of duck down and pour a glass behind the counter. And it's actually really good. So Vikings and Celts would cross a river of mead to go through different levels of heaven. It was made by the Romans and the Greeks. And something I didn't know until I got into this game is that actually there's honeybees, and not the exact same kind as honeybees from Europe, but a species of bees called Melipona bees that live in the Caribbean and Central and South America. And Jen and our kids and I, we were on vacation in the Yucatan 2 years ago, and we were riding our bikes through the jungle in this ancient Mayan city called Coba. And we get to the pyramid, and our guide said they built this pyramid for the honeybee god. And anthropologists called it the descending god, because this guy was upside down, carved in stone, flying, would look like down from heaven. And it was actually a honeybee. And so I asked our guide, well, do you guys still make mead? And he said, well, yeah, for special occasions, we take honey and cacao nibs and ferment them together and make mead. So it doesn't matter where you're from or where your ancestors are from. Mead is part of our DNA. So what is mead? It's the world's oldest fermented beverage. And it can be made with all of the different things that you can imagine making alcohol. So alcohol, sugars, we're going to talk a little bit more about fermentation in a minute, but mead, if you have had any connection, it was likely in a Renaissance fair or you read about it in literature. And if you know anything about mead, you may think, well, it's made from honey, so it must be sweet. And quite often that's the case. But mead can be very dry. And in alcohol, dry means not sweet. And it can be semi-sweet, it can be very sweet like a port, it can be still, meaning not carbonated like a red wine or white wine, or it can be as sparkling as champagne. And the different honeys that we use to make mead are just as diverse as wine grapes, malts, or hops that go into beer and wine. So how do we ferment, and why is it different? Well, when you're making beer, there's a very important step where you first have to convert the sugars from grains into fermentable sugars in the mash tun. And then there's the boiling process. And so in brewing, we have what we call hot side and cold side brewing. So you could drop a spoon on the floor and put it in that boil kettle, and because you're boiling, it wouldn't really matter. But once the beer is cooled and you've created wort and you're about to pitch yeast, everything has to be clean and sanitized. Now, typically in winemaking, and for us with making mead and hard cider, there's absolutely no heat involved. And so everything has to be clean and sanitized, number one. So we don't have to convert the sugars in honey or fruit juice. The yeast is going to be ready to use those sugars and to turn it into CO2 and alcohol and esters and phenols, these delicious aromas and flavors that turn into the products we make. One of the differences in how we ferment mead is we really focus on managing the fermentation. So when I go to a brewery, we'll spend 6 hours doing a collaboration brew day. And when they come to visit me to make mead, we're going to make the mead pretty quick. And they're like, wow, that's it? That's your brew day? I say, well, yeah, it's pretty easy on day one, but we're going to spend a couple of hours for the subsequent days, sometimes up to a week, managing the fermentation. So yeast goes through several life cycles. And in the beginning, it's preparing to grow a bud or an acrospore before it splits off with mitosis. And it's actually going to scrub or absorb, assimilate all of the oxygen possible that's available in the wort in beer or in the must in wine, mead, and cider making. So must is unfermented mead. And we actually help that process by sending food grade oxygen through a stone. And this is a term for a device that actually breaks the oxygen molecules down to about 0.2 microns to a size that the yeast can use very easily. And we're going to add nutrients like B vitamins and yeast salts. And we're going to degas. So when the yeast begins to ferment, it's going to create CO2, which when we're going to have a carbonated product, or in beer you want in the end, but you don't really want it in there as far as optimal health of the must. And so we actually will pump our must every day to remove the gas that's being created from fermentation to create the ideal environment. We can also measure and monitor and maintain the ideal pH, and we'll use lots of different yeast strains. Just yesterday, we did a collaboration with Moto Sonora, a new brewery from Tucson, and as part of the ethos of Moto Sonora, one of the owners, Jeff, drove yeast up on the back of his motorcycle that we pitched into our collaboration. And we were using a Belgian yeast because I was down there on Wednesday making a Belgian beer. But most of the time, we're going to be using wine yeast, especially white wine yeast. But we have proprietary yeast strains banked at White Labs in San Diego, one of the best yeast banks in the world. And we can call up White Labs and have our proprietary yeast shipped to us the next day whenever we need it on ice packs ready to go. We have used hundreds of ingredients to make our products. We even made a mole mead once with over 100 unique ingredients in a single product. And fermentation can take days to a week typically. Sometimes we'll have a fermentation, especially with a higher alcohol product, that could take up to a month. But typically we're done fermenting within a week. And what we're really doing is reversing the process of what the bees did. We are destabilizing honey by mixing honey and water together at a given ratio, or honey with fruit juice. So I am a barrel geek. And in this photo, you're going to see some barrels that look kind of old and some barrels that look kind of new. So the newer barrels are made of American oak from different regions around the country, Missouri, or Minnesota, or Appalachian oak. And then the older barrels you're going to see are typically spirits barrels or former spirits barrels, mostly bourbon. But we've used Madeira and port barrels, and we've used gin and rum and tequila. We even have a barrel exchange project where, for no charge, we will exchange barrels with our friends in the brewing world, and they will make beer aged in mead barrels, and we'll do mead aged in beer barrels, quite often creating products that have never been made ever before and will never be made ever again. So barrels are awesome. And what we're doing is sort of equal parts art and science. So the science starts in the beginning with fermentation, and then we get into blending and barrel aging and pairing flavors for something that will be truly unique. And something that's kind of cool when you look at these barrels, there's not a single nail holding those together. And they are rated to be stacked 6 high on those racks, each weighing when full about 600 pounds apiece. And there is an ancient art called coopering, where barrel makers or coopers will assemble these perfectly shaped staves and pound down the hoops and toast the wood over fire with all different techniques to create different flavors. And one of the cool things is you may read like a back label on a wine, and you'll read that it has vanilla in it, and you'll think, how did this red wine get vanilla? Well, when you cook lignin, that fibrous material that makes wood as we know it, you actually chemically change the lignin to vanillin, which is chemically identical to the vanilla bean or vanilla ice cream flavor that you're going to have at home. So categories of mead. One of the biggest things that's really kind of fun for us to explain, and sometimes frustrating, but when you do something as Jen and I have with mead, and it's so new, you get used to this stuff. And you'll tell someone, okay, so mead is, it's made from honey, but then we can use these different things. And then someone will look at you and say, all right, well, what kind of beer is it? And you're like, no, it's not beer. So trying to communicate to a brand new consumer that has had alcohol before, that mead is its own category, is sometimes pretty funny and challenging. So just like there are IPAs and stouts and pilsners in the beer world, and in the wine world, you could have, a really nice, clean, crisp, dry white wine. You can have a big Napa Cab. You can have port. There are all these different styles. Mead is the same way. So a traditional mead is made with honey, water, and yeast. And I always kind of say that when you make a perfect traditional mead, that's kind of like a brewer making a perfect lager or pilsner. There's nowhere to hide any mistakes in your process or any off flavors. And it's really a great way to showcase the honey varietal that you're choosing to use. So mostly we're going to use wildflower honey in our products, or mesquite honey, because those are the 2 types of honey that are most available to us in Arizona, and we can build potentially scalable products with those honeys. But every once in a while we get something really cool like cotton or white bur sage or some cool rare honey. And when we are able to obtain that from a local beekeeper, I always like to make that into a traditional mead to really showcase the unique flavors from that. So a melomel is any mead made with fruit. And within the category of melomel, there are subcategories. So a piment is when we ferment wine grapes in honey. There's no water there. So it's very expensive to make and quite often barrel aged and delicious. And then we can take a piment and put it into a Scotch barrel, for example, and create something that tastes like a port if you use Scotch instead of the aguardiente they use to fortify port in Portugal. A sizer is made with apples and honey, and a metheglin is any spiced mead. And the word metheglin comes from the Welsh word metheglin, meaning medicine. And then a braggot is when you make a mead with cereal grains. So in America, if you produce alcohol, you're either a brewery, a winery, or a distillery. And that's how the government divides and conquers and taxes us. And we're not allowed to have cereal grains on site. Technically, you're not allowed to have a packet of oatmeal in my winery. But when we go to do a collaboration with the brewery, that's quite often what we're going to make because we're a meadery after all. And so sometimes our friends will even purchase Arizona honey, which is what we're known for all of our bottled products. And we'll make some really creative beers that no one's ever had before. And then there's specialty meads, and that's really a category for anything. And we've used marshmallows and chocolate and vanilla and maple syrup. So why mead? Why now? Well, you know, most of our customers come from the craft beer world. And I think it's because craft beer drinkers really want to try the next big thing. And there's sort of like a business model with breweries now where they'll take an IPA recipe, change one hop and make a cool graphic and have a nice label. And they're just changing one hop each week with a new IPA. And it's really cool. And people will wait in line to get that. Craft beer drinkers want the next thing. And mead is the next big thing in craft beverages. I think we're demonstrating that. Our industry is growing like crazy. When Jen and I started Superstition Meadery almost 9 years ago, there were about 150 meaderies in the country, or just people making mead. Some of that could have been, breweries like Dogfish Head doing their braggot that they came out with. Well, mead is the next big thing. There's 600 meaderies now in America. There are new meaderies opening up around the world every week, at least before 2020. And we have done collaborations with people that created the first meadery in Norway and the first meadery in Thailand. One of the things that's interesting about mead is that no one's ever come in with a couple $1 million and built a meadery like you see in the brewing world and the wine world. So the industry is growing really fast, but it's really, truly a grassroots effort where small scale people like ourselves that started as home brewers are starting these businesses. But it's being truly embraced by craft beer drinkers all around the world. And if you think about, here's some indicators about how mead has arrived. You guys have probably seen the Budweiser Bud Night advertising campaign that lasted for a couple of years. I mean, how many hundreds of millions of dollars did AB InBev spend on commercials making fun of mead over, college football games and NFL games? And they were helping make mead a household name. And AB InBev even introduced a very low ABV session mead in Ohio in the Midwest about a year and a half ago, just after that happened. So when you think about mead and you think about ancient literature and some of the history we talked about, there's still some pretty cool references to mead that are happening with Game of Thrones, the TV show American Gods. Ken Follett just came out with a book called The Evening and the Morning talking about mead. And on Shark Tank, which is one of my favorite shows, and if you're watching this video of me talking about business, you probably watch Shark Tank as well. A guy we know named Ayeli in San Francisco has a meadery. It's very small, called Be Divine, but they make some great stuff. They just got an offer from 4 of the 5 sharks on November 13th. And then in Arizona, if you're familiar with the Arizona wine scene, you probably know that Maynard, the lead singer of the band Tool, has a winery in Arizona, a couple of wineries actually. And he was just on the Joe Rogan podcast talking about a mead he made. And Jen and I were able to hang out with Maynard this summer and share about 12 different meads brought up to his winery. It was pretty cool. So Craft Distro wants to know, what's the next big thing? What's the next hard seltzer that's going to make us billions of dollars? And of course, our argument is, well, that very well could be mead. And I think that the session meads we're introducing this year, we'll talk a bit more about later in this talk, really could bring mead into the daily drinking habits of what we call crossover drinkers, the craft beer person who is going to try a wine once in a while, or a seltzer, a mead, or a cider, something else to spice up their day or pair with their meal. So millennials are our biggest followers when it comes to social media, and really, I think the early adapters of new trends. And this crosses over lots of industries. And when you ask a millennial, and this is from the Brewers Association from their annual report last year, what is the most important thing to you when it comes to your drinking habits? And the number one answer is local ingredients. And we use local Arizona honey in every bottle of mead that we make. And I say bottle because when I introduced cans to the market this year, we had to figure out a way, even with sacrificing margins for volume, to have a product that would be positioned something like a double IPA in a 16-ounce can on the shelf. And to do that, we sourced international honey, which is very real, awesome honey from India and South America. And we have a connection with the producers of that honey. It's delicious, and it costs about half of what our Arizona honey costs. So anyways, the Arizona honey is very important to us and our brand. So mead for the people, it's here. And from barbecues to boats to Michelin-starred restaurants, there is a mead for every occasion. This can that you see here in this slide is Electric Sunrise. It's one of Jen's favorite things that we've made in the last year. And we took Sangiovese grapes from California and actually fermented that with Arizona honey and created this amazing lower ABV. It's kind of like what you would think of as a wine cooler because it's carbonated, but just a delicious product called Electric Sunrise. So when you're serving mead, you can serve it in a flight. And if you do that, if you happen to have a restaurant or bar, it is really the best way to introduce a new customer to mead, because for the price of one glass, you get to try 4 or 5 things. And our biggest product as a company when it comes to our retail outlets, and we have a small restaurant in Prescott and a new restaurant in Phoenix, it's our flight program. So we'll offer 12 different samples of ciders or meads in a row, usually starting with cider and then going dry to semi-sweet to sweet to our real decadent barrel-aged meads at the end of that flight for $24. And it's about 2 glasses of wine. It's great to share and fun for date night. But we've got cans of mead. We've got mead on tap. We have all different bottle formats. Mead can be an amazing element of a cocktail. So we're introducing mead to cocktail bars. We're getting on menus and getting tap handles in new places like we never have before. And we usually serve our mead sort of like a white wine. And as it warms up in the glass, you have this product that becomes more expressive with its aroma and its flavors. And so that's really how I like to enjoy a mead, is starting off kind of cool and approaching room temperature by the time you're done and ready for your second order. So it's important to store mead just like wine, or if you were cellaring, an imperial stout in a cool, dry place, always, unopened, of course. But once you open it, our 750 milliliter bottles have flip tops, and it's super convenient to close that top. You don't need to worry about finding the cap or getting the cork back in the top of the bottle. And then if we do have a corked bottle, you can go ahead and throw that in there and throw it in the fridge. And unlike beer, which I say you have, a couple hours at most to enjoy before the carbonation goes away, or wine where you have a couple of days, you can enjoy mead, especially the higher ABV and sweeter meads, for several weeks. So when we talk about critically evaluating mead, first, and this is based on the categories that we have on our sell sheets, we look at the appearance. And if no one had any insight into what mead is or superstition, and they saw a bottle on the shelf, I've always said, well, it better be clear and look beautiful. So almost everything we do is filtered and clear, but based on the different fruits that we use, it can have any color from like almost water white all the way up to like really rich reds and even browns into what we make. And so then we'll evaluate how it smells and how it tastes. And then we have the soul, which is, how does this mead make you feel? And that's really that's kind of like my inside joke with some of the Wine Spectator crazy descriptions of wines. And so we talk about the soul of our product and then what we would pair it with. Now, there's no sommelier program for mead, and beer has really embraced the Cicerone program, which is cool. But the only thing that exists as far as sort of a certification is the Beer Judge Certification Program, or BJCP Mead Judge Cert. And so I'm a BJCP beer judge and mead judge. And so I always tell our staff, if anyone wants to take the mead judge exam, I'm happy to cover your cost and training manuals and go ahead and get that certification. So who is Superstition Meadery? We're the largest winery in Arizona. And as Jerry was saying, we were named the best small business in America last year. We've become an industry leader, and we are a company with a mission. And our mission is to reintroduce the world's oldest fermented beverage to mankind. And that's not just Prescott or Arizona, and that's why we travel around the world, at least before 2020, going to all sorts of events and introducing our product to all sorts of people. So Superstition began when Jen gave me a homebrew kit in 2009, and I just fell in love with the process of brewing. And before my first beer was done fermenting, I went to the local homebrew store in Tempe when we lived in the Valley, and I said, hey, I want to make a Belgian beer and I want to make a mead. And Jen was from the Northeast, and we always have at least a half gallon of real maple syrup from Vermont in our fridge. And so I made a maple mead for Thanksgiving. And it turned out that my first meads were actually much better than my first beers. And like any home brewer, I always ask the question, what would it be like to have a brewery? And I asked the question, what would it be like to have a meadery? And so we decided to move from the Valley to Prescott. And within 1 month of being in Prescott, we went to Juniper Well Ranch and Vineyards, which does not exist as a winery anymore, but at the time was one of Arizona's new startup wineries. And Jen and I became really good friends with the owners, Dave and Linda. They were about to retire, and we sort of became like their adopted kids, and our kids were their grandkids, and we would help them make wine. And we did everything but prune vines for a year. And over that time, we really proved ourselves. And so here you can see Jen cleaning out a wine press. That's called a bladder press. And what you'll do is connect a hose to a valve, and you'll inflate that rubber device inside of what's sort of like a spaghetti colander, and you'll squeeze the grapes and the juice runs down the side. And then you can see my son Logan in a crazy monsoon cleaning out a fermenter that we borrowed from those guys. But we started our business as the first alternating proprietorship in Arizona. And that's where one separate and licensed winery rents space from another. And so our winemaking or mead making business began with 18 square feet. We had 4 barrels. And in 2012, we made just about 300 gallons of product. 5 years later, we became the biggest winery in Arizona with 2 SBA loans now. But before that, we decided to move on from Juniper Well Ranch because Dave and Linda were selling the ranch and retiring to move to Phoenix. And Jen and I, we found our space in Prescott. And if you guys have been in to our place, you'll know that it is truly unique. We are in a cellar that we renovated. It was built in 1901 in downtown Prescott, right on the courthouse square. And we really were doing extreme home brewing and using barrels and all sorts of techniques that we were learning. And we started making really some of the best mead in the world, as it turned out, with lots of trial and error. So we thought it would take 3 to 4 years to realize the potential of our production space and tasting room in downtown Prescott. And it took 3 to 4 months. We had 34 barrels in service. We had barrels in our office, and we were able to save up enough money to get a down payment together for our first SBA loan, also made possible by the ACA with a bridge loan from our local bank. And you can see this cement slab in the top circle image in this slide, which is what became our state-of-the-art production facility. So here you can see our fermentation tanks, and even today, our production facility looks very different. We have tanks going up almost to the ceiling now, and they just got delivered a couple of days ago. And you can see our barrel room here. We were able to really turn this business into something special with our amazing staff and a lot of help from government organizations, the SBSBDC, but also our friends in the craft industry. Collaboration has been something that has been really near and dear to us for a long time, and it's been really no exception from day one. So Jen and I have been growing this thing with just tons of hard work, crazy late nights, and it's led to where we are today, which is opening Superstition downtown, the world's first mead and food pairing restaurant. This was our third SBA loan. So our first was to get the land and build the building. Second was to get equipment like our bottling line. And the third was to do this $2 million project in downtown Phoenix. So this is at 1110 East Washington, just a half mile from where the Diamondbacks play. We're right on the light rail. We're in the next part of Phoenix to really become a hot spot for eating and drinking. You may have heard of Bianco's Pizzeria. It's just a few blocks to our west. Chris Bianco's opening up a new high-end Italian restaurant a few blocks to our east. There's a restaurant that's really popular just north of us. And there is massive development happening all along this corridor heading east from downtown Phoenix. Within 10 years, there's going to be 3,500 new apartments and condos built within walking distance of our restaurant. So our retail is really important to us because it allows us to control the message of our company and our products like no other way. It's the most effective communication device that we have. That's our staff functioning sort of as tour guides as you come in to experience what we're doing. And mead and food pairing is just an awesome concept. When you look at our menu, there's a suggested mead or cider to go with every appetizer, every dish. And our menu is really focusing on tapas. You can see our ahi tartar here. And we're keeping the food prices very accessible so that people want to keep coming back, trying new things, just as we're enjoying the margins that come from selling our own alcohol. So COVID-19, let's talk about what happened this year. I think that one of the biggest things that we've had to deal with as small business owners is mitigating the fear that is out there. And it's fear that we see every day in the media, and there are very real considerations. And when it comes to COVID, with folks who are at risk and everything, with all due respect to the very real challenges faced by first responders, and I know firsthand from having done that for 20 years, there's a legitimate fear out there, but there's also some misinformation that's happening, and there are some crazy policies that are being turned out that are really creating this fear, and we're left to mitigate it as small business owners. I don't think there's a peer-reviewed journal article out there that says the air in our restaurant is going to be more infectious than the air in a Safeway grocery store line. But the government really has, first and foremost, turned the service industry, restaurants, bars, into the evil empire here. And I don't think there's any reason why we can't use common sense measures and masks and sanitation, of course, that we always use in the restaurant industry to keep everyone as safe as possible relative to just about any other business environment out there. And there's the fear that, you know, our staff and our families have, and that our employees have. And we're always trying to find ways to keep things safe and as smart as possible. But when it comes to COVID, when it first got really real, we were actually on vacation in Cuba, and we were talking about how we could hijack a dive boat to get back to America if we had to. And we came home to chaos, and it was the hardest week of our existence as a business, because we had 30 employees week 2, week 3 of March, and by week 4 we had 10 employees. And making that decision was just devastating for Jen and I. And I'm sure if you're tuned into this, you may have gone through a similar experience. We were able to get really organized though. And our staff came together like never before. We were able to have a phone call with our local congressman, Paul Gosar. And there's this term that his head staffer used, and he said, I want to be clear that this is a government-induced economic crisis. And that actually was, it gave Jen and I some kind of relief to hear our leaders say, hey, we know what the policies are doing to your business. And it was, again, just devastating. So what did we do? We set up the war room. And I'm sitting in the war room right now. This is our conference room in our office on Gurley Street. And we got all of our remaining staff together at least twice a week. And we just went through all of our minds and came up with ideas. And most of them never got put into play, but several of them did. At the same time we were coming up with these ideas, Jen, who really, she runs our retail outlets and handles all of our financial compliance and management and has a great mind for that. She also maintains our relationships with our banks for our 3 SBA loans. She had our PPP loan filled out and ready to turn in before the ink was dry on the rules. So that allowed us to start bringing people back as soon as it funded. But before that happened, we came up with a lot of new programs. So we did really deep discounts in our tasting room. And in the spirit of keeping our staff working, we offered our employee pricing, which was 30% off all of our retail prices. And we did that for a couple of months. And I never wanted to get into that sort of Bed Bath & Beyond cycle of training the consumer to only wait for a deep discount to buy your products, but we had to do it. And it worked. And it wasn't just us. We saw our friends in the industry, in the craft beer world and the mead world, doing the same thing and offering these discounts in their tasting rooms. We created a drive-through on the weekends, curbside pickup every day when we weren't allowed to have any customers doing products in our place. We created the Date in the Box, which was a pretty cool collaboration with a local chocolatier, florist, and bakery to get this everything you need for date night, including some bottles of mead you could choose, purchased, delivered to your house with a florist. We created Superstition Express, which was a situation where our distributor based out of Phoenix was also going through what we all were at the time. And he was able to figure out legally with the state liquor department how to do home deliveries of alcohol. And overnight, we created a website, we created a system for receiving payments, sort of a point of sale system. And we were, for about 8 weeks, doing statewide deliveries. And if you lived in Phoenix, it was 7 days a week. We created a gift certificate program where we were selling gift certificates where they would have a higher value after COVID to come and redeem in our tasting rooms. We did website discounts. We have a web store where, because we're a winery, we can ship to 40 states and DC. And besides the discounts, we created a cocktail kit. And we did live Instagram broadcasts, making cocktails with our products. We created a bestsellers kit. We created a brand new subscription-based mead club. We did giveaways. And we went and did sort of an audit of our barrels to think, okay, we probably shouldn't be investing a ton of money in brand new products right now. What do we have that's aging, that's ready? And we worked really hard to come up with super cool graphic design names and labels and products, and applying our themes and creativity and innovation to these new releases that kept our customers engaged throughout the summer and even up till today. I think we've released more new products this year than any other year in the history of our company. You can see on this slide some of the examples of graphic design, our discount codes that we came up with throughout the whole, really the hard part of this, really, which was April and May. So the survival, it happened because of our staff participation and engagement, getting everyone to work together to come up with these new ideas. And we were actually able to make lemonade out of the situation in a few ways. We have thousands of new customers on our web store that probably never would have happened if it wasn't for going through all of this innovative change and pivoting that happened with COVID. So when it comes to growing a brand, creating a niche, and figuring out how you're going to grow your company, you've got to ask, I think most importantly, what are the changes that are really affecting your industry? And how do you stay on top of all of that? How do you have this authenticity? Which I think can be defined as the smallest distance between the person making a product and the person enjoying it. And in this photo behind Jen and I and the SBA administrator, you can see our demijohn showing people in our new place in Phoenix how mead is actually made. So they can go and touch that and be like, that's mead right there. But having relationships with your political leaders is super important to knowing what's happening in your industry. Winning awards can help let everyone know that you're excelling at what you do through critical review of judging. And then collaborations has been something that's super important to us. I use this slide in particular because these are our friends from Wuhan, China, who visited us and actually went to Wuhan 6 months before everything started and made a beer with these guys, which is about a couple-hour train ride west of Shanghai. festivals are an amazing way to reach out and create new customers, expand your base, and get into new markets. And when it comes to exporting, a great deal of what we've done around the world has happened from the relationships that we've actually made through going to festivals around the world. So the future of Superstition, we're going to maximize our Arizona footprint by working with one of the largest alcohol distributors in the state. Right now, we have distribution in 27 states. Our goal is, of course, to reach all 50, maybe by the end of next year. We're going to expand our international reach. And even through COVID, we've been able to open up new markets like Japan, and Switzerland, and Hungary. So I want to talk for a couple of minutes as we wrap up here about how we've worked with the SBDC and the SBA and the ACA. These organizations, if you know about them, if you're on this call, but I probably every 2 weeks I have a conversation with someone that's new to the business world. And the first thing I tell them is you need to go talk to the SBDC, because they're going to be giving you advice and create opportunities for you to connect with people, even if it's not in your industry, but folks that can give you advice on what will probably be your weaker links, your weak points of your background. Now, they have meeting rooms, and several times we've met with Jerry to do SWOT analysis, and it's kind of cool just to, even though we have a conference room where I'm sitting right now, to change the environment from your staff and to have professional AV equipment. It's really awesome. We've worked with the SBA to create what we're hoping this will be one of the biggest changes in the meat industry. If it wasn't for COVID, this would have been in the bag by now. But I was able to, through our regional advocate, get in touch with the top 2 lawyers for the SBA in DC and have them advocate for us for mead having its own category within the Code of Federal Regulations through the Alcohol, Tobacco, Tax, and Trade Bureau. And we're hoping that that really turns out. And then we even had a challenge with getting a shipment into Korea. And the SBA connected me with the U.S. Commercial Service, who connected me with the Foreign Agricultural Service based out of Seoul to help us resolve a problem. So it is really amazing, the sort of interconnected web that happens from working with the SBDC. And again, they helped us connect with the ACA, sponsoring this boot camp, who was able to help us get our first SBA loan. So I think everything that we're talking about can sort of be summed up with this slide. And the best advice I think I ever received before I started a business was from a fireman that had a real estate thing going on the side. And he told me that you need faith, good credit, and you need to work hard. And I've turned that into believing in your mission, really maintaining good credit, which is certainly optimal for us, and getting our loans. That is how we've grown our business, because it's just Jen and I. There are no investors. It's her and I and our 3 SBA loans, and a ton of crazy risk, as you guys have all been through, I'm sure, as entrepreneurs, and lots of hard work. So hopefully within a couple of months, we'll be in a place where we can all have good times again. So I can't wait to see what 2021 is going to have in store for us and for Arizona and all of our businesses. It's I'm an eternal optimist, I think, and I really believe that with the good news of multiple vaccines coming out, hopefully by summertime we can get back to normal and be ready for a strong year. So I think that we're just about at 10 o'clock, so I'm going to turn it over to Faith.
No problem. Thank you so much, Jeff. If I didn't love mead before, I am a fan now. So thank you so much for sharing that presentation with us. I know we do have one question in the Q&A box for you. So I don't know if you can see it or if you'd like me to read that to you.
Oh, I'll go ahead and stop the share, and I can see the Q&A box. All right, you mentioned SBA loans for facilities and equipment. All right, mead's expensive to produce, and it generally takes quite a lot of time. We're able to secure loans for that part of the process as well. Seems like a lot of cash to float without realizing sales when you want to make a jump in production size. So that's a very good question. So our first SBA loan was for our facility, and our second was for equipment, and our third was for Phoenix. And you're right that, Carl, it does take a lot of time. So I wouldn't say that we receive loans specifically for working capital to make our product. That revenue has come from reinvesting what we've made as a company. So I think there are definitely opportunities to get working capital for that sort of thing, to purchase your raw materials. But that's, I guess, always been funded through just reinvesting what we've done.
Excellent. And then we have one more question for you, Jeff. I'm curious to learn what you find most challenging in your internal business, such as retail inventory planning, finance, accounting, etc. What would you want to improve on?
That's also a very good question. I would say, without reservation, our biggest challenge is communication. We have identified that through doing SWOT analysis, and we have identified lots of different ways to improve communication between our staff internally. We use Slack as an app, where we communicate just between ourselves. And when it comes to communicating our brand and our ethos and the merits of our products, it takes constant education and training. And I would say that it all comes down to communication. And then as an organization, you have to find and figure out and test all different ideas and ways to improve communication across, up and down, in and out of your organization. So communication is our biggest challenge. And then I guess right after that, of course, it's staff. Like, we are in an industry, in the service industry, where we have a lot of turnover. And so we have to figure out ways to keep everyone that works for us motivated and to constantly have refined methods for training new incoming folks as restaurant operators.
Fantastic. Thank you, Jeff. I know we are short on time, so if you have any additional questions for Jeff, please feel free to email those to us. I will drop my email into the chat box for you. But Jeff, thank you so much for spending time with us today. It is always so amazing. I think a part of my job to help and hear people's passions turn into success stories. And so thank you so much for Jerry and Shivani and Keith, who also joined us today. It just speaks so much volumes to how a community can really help a dream thrive. And so I think that's just the best for our 100th session, as well as kind of our kickoff to the Thanksgiving holiday. So I want to thank everyone for joining us today. Again, we will resume boot camps next Tuesday. And so until then, I hope everyone has a very safe and fun holiday. So thank you all so much again. Happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you. Thanks, Jeff. Great presentation.
Thanks. Nice to see everyone. Congratulations, Jeff.
Take care, guys.
Bye.